Today, I'm going to be having a conversation with Dr. Ruth Anderson. Wendy and I had a chat about this a couple of weeks ago and decided that seeing as I have so many interesting guests here at the Chateau during the Chateau Life residency, that it could be fun and informative to have some conversations with other people that are around my table at the moment. This week's Love Letters Life and Other Conversations is between myself and Ruth Anderson, and I hope you enjoy it. Hello, Wendy.
Hello, Jane.
Welcome to Love Letters Life and Other Conversations.
Fill your cup and make it.
Good morning, it's Jane Webster, and today I'm going to have a conversation with my friend, Dr. Ruth Anderson. And Ruth is here at Chateau Bosquet in her second month of a Chateau Life residency. And we've been having lots of interesting conversations. Ruth is a sports psychologist, and Wendy and I had been talking last week about me doing a couple of conversations with guests at the Chateau, just to mix it up a little bit for you. And so today I'd like to introduce you to Ruth. Hi, Ruth. How are you?
Hi, Jane. I'm very good. How can I not be great? I've been at Way for nearly 2 months now.
I know, it's been so much fun, hasn't it? It's funny because I was talking to a girlfriend the other day and she said, how are the residents going? And I said, really well. Our April residents were gorgeous, and we think we both made some lifelong friends there, didn't we? And it's pretty much the same this month as well. I know Ruth and I will remain friends anyway. We've been having lots of interesting conversations, and I wanted to chat with you today, Ruth, about a quote that came up this morning. You know, I love Jung Pueblo, and that's his pen name. He writes aspirational sort of quotes each day. I thought it might be a nice little springboard for you and I to start a conversation today. So I'll read it. There is huge power in letting go. Not only can it heal you, but it can also bring you what you wanted. Good things come more quickly when there isn't tension blocking their way. Now that quote really spoke to me this morning. I thought that would be a good place for us to start, yes, but also to discuss in terms of what you do. So first of all, Ruth, let's have a chat about what you do. What is it that you do?
Well, like you said, I'm a sports psychologist. It's a very niche profession. There's not a lot of people that work in sports psychology and elite sport. And so a lot of people don't actually understand what the area is, and also the transferability of what sports psychologists do to work with athletes to other performance domains, whether that's in work or life. So my primary role is to work with, at the moment, elite athletes. My background has been as a clinical psychologist, and then I moved into sport and have worked in elite sport since I started at the Australian Institute of Sport. And since that time, I've worked across 4 Olympic Games and worked with teams in both Australia and also Great Britain. And my key objective really is to equip athletes with the psychological skills to be able to perform under pressure. So when you're in a high performance environment, it actually takes a higher level of psychological skill to be able to perform at your best. And athletes work really diligently on all the physical, technical, tactical aspects of their sport. Yet somehow it's just assumed that people should know what to do psychologically. And if you don't, then it's viewed as a weakness or a deficit. And it's actually just the reverse. Performing under pressure requires a higher level of psychological skill than you require in daily life. And so I work with athletes to be able to develop their ability to manage performance anxiety, build self-belief in their ability to perform, how to identify and regulate all of the emotion that comes with performance, as well as their thought processes, and then to develop plans for how they need to operate psychologically when they're actually performing. And then aside from that, obviously, elite athletes are like everyone else and can experience stress and need to build resilience to be able to cope with the stresses of not only their lifestyle in sport, but also out of sport. Lots of athletes are trying to juggle dual careers so that they prepare themselves for life after sport as well. So it's all around trying to equip people proactively to be able to understand and become self-aware of their psychological processes, and then know what to do to be able to self-regulate in the moment when it really matters to perform.
Okay. So we had a really interesting conversation here a few weeks ago when we were having a dinner, and a girlfriend of mine was here, and we were having a discussion about this very issue and how transferable it is in business, without going into what her business was. But really, a lot of these skills and tools that you're talking about, and the way in which humans are hardwired when they're anxious or when they have a threat or any of those human emotions, surely all of these skills could be used
Definitely
by anyone that's in their work, in their personal life. Am I right in thinking that, or is it really just for the elite athletes?
No, definitely. I mean, in my private business, I work with a range of people who I would consider high performers. So that would be, I've worked with singing voice coaches. I've worked with medical doctors, surgeons, sitting for their specialists, those professions where you have to perform under high pressure, but also just for the everyday person who wants to work at being better. So there's very limited resources available for people to really proactively work on their psychological state. So often what happens is we either wait until we've got a significant problem with our mood, or your mood being low, or we just tolerate quite high levels of anxiety just because we have to. And you'll push through it, and you might be able to cope with it, but you might not be thriving. And over time, that stress accumulates and can have a negative impact. And so, there's a lack of understanding around the fact that you can actually enhance your psychological functioning. You don't have to wait for a problem. There's also a lack of access to services for that. You can go for clinical problems. There's a plethora of information on the internet in terms of clinical mental health issues now, which is great. So you can access that. But there's not a lot for proactive development. And unfortunately, at the moment, the internet is also dominated by a lot of unqualified advice around mindset coaches and wellbeing workers. And while some of the information is good, it's not really based on an evidence-based model that's really going to create psychological change, because it's hard. We all want an easy fix. We all want the 10 steps to mental toughness, but it doesn't exist. And people have to be really willing to invest over time in actually making the change you need to. And that's hard. If it was easy, we'd all be much more high functioning.
We'd all be doing it.
That's exactly right.
Because anxiety, when activated, when it comes upon us, it activates the body's fight and flight sort of responses, doesn't it? Or a freeze response. So unable to talk, unable to cope, unable to perform in the demands that are required of us.
That's right.
So, I mean, I love the idea, as you and I have been talking about, that, wouldn't it be great if we were more proactive, so that, yes, anxiety is normal and it's an adaptive emotional response, but wouldn't it be lovely if we had a proactive approach, and when these feelings of distress or worry or anxiousness or, maybe even more heightened responses happen, that we have tools in our pocket and things that we can do. And I suppose that's where we get back to, my little Jung Pueblo aspirational quote from this morning.
That's right. So, it's anxiety that stops you from being able to let go. Yes. Anxiety is one of the most misunderstood emotions. And it's also the one that you can train yourself to manage the most effectively, really. And everyone will experience a level of anxiety. It's a universal emotion that we all have. But because of that flight or fight response that you articulated, of course, it comes on automatically. We have a physiological and a cognitive response when we're anxious, and we all label that as bad because it feels so uncomfortable for us. And
it could be heart palpitations, or it could be trembling, or it could be an inability to talk. I mean, I was talking to someone last week, and I said, "You must have heard my quivering voice."
Yes.
I mean, when I become anxious, I get this sort of, my bottom lip starts to quiver, and I get a shortness of breath, or I have poor concentration.
That's right. And what's misunderstood around that is it's not because it's an inherent weakness in your psychological functioning. It's because it's a universal emotion. And when you're under challenge or threat, you'll experience anxiety. And the one thing that's the most well-researched in psychology, and the one area that every single elite athlete I've ever worked in at every level of performance needs to master, is this fact that actually anxiety can actually help you to perform. Because when you're in that slightly heightened state, your activation is high physiologically as well as psychologically. It's actually much easier to focus and keep your focus and attention than when you're really relaxed. And also your reaction times are quicker, your decision making will be better. So there's a level of anxiety that actually enhances you to perform. And it's that last kind of push for you to maybe reach a higher level of performance before. However, you've got to be willing to tolerate the emotion and know what to do so that the anxiety doesn't keep escalating, and then it's going to be detrimental to your performance. And so that's the real challenge for all of us, is learning how to find ways to deal with what your unique and individual symptoms are of anxiety, because they're different for everyone, and know how to self-regulate that. So how to manage it and still be able to perform in the moment while anxious. And then the trick is, the more you do that, you develop a tolerance for it, and you can keep increasing the challenges that you're going into and get new experiences and develop skills because your tolerance is building up for those situations. So I often talk to athletes around, if you're not 20 or 30% anxious about something, well, you're probably not challenging yourself. And so it's not
so interesting. It's so interesting that you say that, Ruth. I remember when I first started the French table 18 years ago, I went to Paris to pick up my very first group. To say that I might have had some anxiety would be the understatement of the year. I was actually in the bathroom on the TGV going up to Paris, vomiting. That's how anxious I was. Now, fast forward 18 years, and the last time I picked a group up in Paris, because I don't do the French table weeks anymore. We have this new platform, which is the Chateau Life Residency. But someone said to me, "Do you still get nervous when you're driving up to Paris to meet a new group?" And here's the answer that I have always said over the last 18 years. Yes, I do. I have butterflies in my stomach. I am a little bit nervous. And I think that the day that I'm not nervous about meeting a new group of people and having them live with me for the week, it's over, because I wouldn't care anymore.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you're invested and you want to do a good job and you want to get a good outcome. And it's normal human nature to start questioning our ability, am I going to be good enough? Do I have the skills to be able to do this? What will they think of me? All those normal questions that come through your mind. But we all are so self-critical often that we think that's just unique to us. But actually, all of those thoughts are just a symptom of being anxious. And it's also probably a sign that you're challenging yourself and putting yourself out of your comfort zone to be able to get new experiences and grow and develop. And it's okay to want to feel safe at times and not put yourself under challenge. So it's definitely not a bad thing to be doing that at different points of time. But I guess it's really about, if you want to move forward and you want to challenge yourself, it is going to be uncomfortable at different points of time, but you can develop skills to be equipped to be able to manage it. You've just got to be willing to firstly put yourself in that uncomfortable position and then know what to do too, because you don't want to be putting yourself in a vulnerable position where you're feeling overwhelmed and not have the skills to be able to do it. The most common behavioral response when we're really highly anxious is just avoidance. You know,
Yes.
I just can't do it. I'll put it off the other day. I won't have this difficult conversation. But the problem is that just then increases your anxiety. So avoidant behavior comes from just, in the short term, it feels better. You feel like the symptoms go away because you're not putting yourself in the situation. But
you're not putting yourself in the situation.
That's right. But then you don't get challenged.
And I guess if we go back to this little quote from this morning, there is huge power in letting go. Not only can it heal you, but it can also bring you what you wanted. Good things come more quickly when there isn't tension blocking their way. See, tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I think that I am the sort of person who monitors my anxiety. I sort of keep track of my experiences, my anxiety, my thought patterns, my feelings, my behaviors. And one of the ways that I keep track of my anxiety is by reading these inspirational quotes and then looking at that and thinking, yes, okay, now that really resonated with me this morning, because there's and you and I went for a walk this morning, and I've got this thing that I've, that is on my mind. But that whole idea of letting go and it bringing a healing, but also bringing you what you want and allowing good things to come through more quickly because the tension that's blocking the issue has been relieved. See, I love that. And I see that as a tool.
Well, yes, and it relates very strongly to one of the key principles of sports psychology and performance, is a way to kind of feel like we're in control of uncertainty or anxiety or other situations that's happening with other people, is to try and have a plan to feel in control of it. And so we'll often go through multiple scenarios in our minds to try and work out what's happening and what's not, but it's often based on just misinformation. We're making predictions off information that might not necessarily be true. And so that idea of letting go really is around the key principle in sports psychology, not focusing on the outcome. You cannot control if you win. You can't, French Open's coming up, going on Monday. You can't control. No player going on court is going to be able to control how they actually can win. And they've got to let go of those thoughts. Everyone wants to be successful. We all want things to work out. But the only thing that's within your control to be able to manage on a daily basis is what you think, what you feel, and what you do. So that's your own psychological functioning. And until you can let go of kind of the perceived outcome that you want and really focus on the current moment, what you need to do to manage yourself well, what you want to do to be able to take control of the choices that you can make about the situation, then what happens is you get the best outcome possible that's within your control. So it's this idea of, you do function more optimally when you're able to focus on what you need to do. Similar to the quote saying, release the tension, you'll function more optimally psychologically, and then you'll get the best outcome that's relevant for you in the situation that you're in. It might not always be what you want, but that's life. Life isn't fair or just some of the time. And so we've got to make our own choices around, what's within our control and how we can thrive in the circumstances that we're currently in.
Yes. And that is, I guess, not just relevant to high functioning sports people, but to everyone. And I've always been, a bit of a planner. I do like to have a plan, but I also like to be equipped with a toolkit of strategies.
Yeah.
And I'm always looking to build that toolkit and pull them out. I'll say to my kids, if they ring me with a problem, okay, let's have a look at the tools that you've got. What relaxation strategies have you got? How can you calm down the sensations that your body is feeling because of the way it's feeling? What cognitive skills can you use to shift your anxious thinking? You know, all of that sort of stuff. And I guess that's where you and I had a wonderful chat when you first arrived, because you're building an app for just this, aren't you? So tell us a little bit about the app, because I'm adamant that this app should be for everyone, not just sports professionals.
Yes, well, I'm definitely trying to design it so it's accessible for anyone that wants to work proactively on their psychological skills to be able to perform better in work, in their life, or if it's appropriate with athletes. I've been working on the idea of trying to transfer the tools and information I'm constantly working on with athletes and emailing through. And so I've been quite keen on putting all of those in a digital form to make it really accessible, but also enhance people's capacity to be able to work on it routinely. Changing your thinking particularly is really challenging. And so if you're not doing it on a daily basis, you don't actually then, you're not able to turn around the thought patterns that have been developed in your mind over a lifetime of different experiences and personality styles. And so I'd been thinking about that for a while, but over time it's evolved, partly through COVID, where I couldn't meet the demand of people wanting to kind of really look at enhancing their mental health, because obviously through that period of time, everyone's had an increased awareness of mental health services. And there's also nothing on the market that combines your ability to be able to learn the skills around performance. So the areas I've mentioned around confidence, thought management, emotional regulation, how to put together a plan to be able to manage pre-performance anxiety, all those types of areas. So combine the skill development along with access to the tools that you can access daily. So if you need the relaxation tracks, they're on your phone or in the pocket, you can reframe your thinking in the moment if you're just stuck and you can't regain the perspective you need. I've got a goal, part of it's around tracking goals and setting goals and monitoring how you're going. So you hold yourself accountable on a daily basis. And with psychological development, I think sometimes it feels very overwhelming and a complex area for people, but simple can be really good. And so you can do some simple strategies on a daily basis to train your mind, just like you do by going for a walk every day or going to the gym.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, you know, really the exercise and the sleeping is sort of fundamentals 101, isn't it, for dealing with anxiety. What about things like, for instance, self-talk strategies, self-talk strategies? You know, I've been here before. I went through this 2 years ago. I coped. It was highly anxious. It was highly emotional, but I got through it.
Yes.
That sort of compassionate self-talk where you are talking to yourself and giving yourself the skills to cope with what is going on. Or I remember my mum used to say to me when I was little, you should have worry time is a really good practice for just 5 or 10 minutes a day, no more.
Yes.
So, you know, there might be different components of worry time. You know, I might have a worry about one of my children. I'll never forget a girlfriend saying to me, "You're only ever as happy as your unhappiest child." And I really believe that. So there might be worry time about a particular child. There might be worry time about a relationship that's really, you know, worrying you. Are those sort of skills going to be on the app as well, Ruth?
Yes, look, you've got some good skills in your toolkit already, Jane. Yes, so definitely, I think the cognitive change is a lot harder to be able to work on over time because you don't know where to start, and it's quite overwhelming to be thinking about what you're thinking about. So it takes a while to develop self-awareness. And so my idea is, if you've got the tools and you know the general principles of how to manage your thinking. So one of the areas I talk about a lot, and it's very similar to what you've talked about there around being compassionate with yourself, is around non-judgmental thinking patterns. Because as soon as we get an anxious thought, as soon as we're doubting our ability, we label that as bad. This is really bad. I shouldn't be thinking like this. I should know how to cope better. Well, actually, then you start feeling anxious about the fact you've got self-doubt, or you start then becoming frustrated because you're not managing your anxious thinking. It only increases your emotional response. So being non-judgmental with your thought processes, not labeling anything as good or bad. It's just what it is.
No,
I'm feeling
it is what it is.
Yeah. Oh, I'm doubting my ability. Oh, I'm thinking too far ahead. I'm thinking about information I don't know is true. So that you're actually really identifying in the moment what's happening with your thought processes. And if you're non-judgmental about it, you can really use it as information that equips you to make the change, because you know what's going on, and then you'll know how to reset your thinking. So on the app, I've got a thought diary where you can go in and write what you're feeling, see the connection with your emotion and your behavior, and then reframe it so that you learn how to be able to use the information that's going on in your mind to be able to help create change. And the general principle is, the common thought traps are what you've mentioned: self-doubt, worry. We just worry about things over and over and over again.
Yes.
We make predictions to try and manage our anxiety. This happens.
I'm very good at those.
That's right. And actually then we're just running through scenarios in your mind, and it causes rumination. So rumination's when it's just, you can't quite stop the thought processes in their mind. So it might not necessarily always be bad or negative thought. It's just too much thought in your mind. And so when you try and reset your mind, you're trying to contain what you're thinking, bring it back to the current moment, and focus on task and action. Because there's a lot of circumstances that are outside of your control that does cause high anxiety. And some people are going probably through highly stressful and difficult circumstances. So you can't necessarily change the situation you're in, but you can change how you manage it. And if you focus your mind on things that are within your control, which is tasks, actions, your behavior, then you feel much more empowered and equipped to be able to make some change. So it's all about how you are able to use the information in your mind as cues to be able to change what you think, and therefore positively impact your emotional response and your behavior.
Okay. So one of the things in my toolbox, which I've used for a couple of years now, is the 5-4-3-2-1 strategy.
Yep.
You know the one I'm talking about?
Yes. Yep.
Helps you to connect with your environment using all 5 senses. It involves, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. It always brings me back to center. And then another one of my favorite tools that I read that book, Atomic Habits.
Yes.
And he talks about habit stacking. I wrote down all the things that I have to do each day. And I worked out that, I probably go to the bathroom about 9 times a day. And so I'm washing my hands in front of the mirror, in front of the vanity 9 times a day. And so now when I'm washing my hands, doesn't matter where I am. I can be in a restaurant bathroom. I can be in my own bathroom. Doesn't matter where. I check in with myself while I am washing my hands. So I have a little chat to myself. How's it going? How are you feeling? How are you feeling about that conversation you just had on the phone? How are you feeling about what Lockie was talking to you about this morning? All those sorts of things. So that sort of self-regulation that really, really helps me to think, okay, this is what is most important on my agenda today. I get as anxious as the next person. But I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's about getting on and doing stuff.
That's
and doing it in the moment.
Yep. And performing in spite of the anxiety. And it might not be perfect, and it might not be great the first time, but it will be the second and the third time. But what you've just talked there is a great example of, firstly, really individualizing. So working out how you respond and what works best for you. And then, but what you've done though is broken it right down into a really simple way that you can stop your anxiety from escalating over time. Because if you're doing a bit of a routine check-in, then you're picking up when they're just concerns, before it becomes something that you've wasted 4 or 5 days about. And then you look back and go, oh my goodness, I'm not coping with it. I'm not managing it. And so doing a simple check-in like that just means those thoughts that are in the back of your mind that you can just push through and still perform okay, still have a good day, but then it builds up and builds up over time. And so the more you can have those proactive strategies, they don't have to be complex. They can be really simple, and they have the most powerful impact. I had a coach once and that I was working with for an Olympic trials, and he was extremely enthusiastic, really great personality. And he came up to me before Olympic trials and said, I've got my psychological strategy worked out for trials. I said, oh, what is it? And he said, walk slow. And that was all it was, because he was someone that in the moment got really excited, would race up and down pool deck, would go up to the athlete, and because they were so excited, start telling the athlete how they performed rather than wait for the athlete to be able to self-reflect and learn and from their skill development. And then at the competition had a powerful impact because he slowed his behaviour down. He thought through what he wanted to say more. By the time he got to the athlete, gave the athlete time to think things through, and then they were able to report back. It was a really successful trials as a result, because the athlete performed better as a result, but also he was able to modify his behaviour better. So he had real clarity around what information he needed to communicate. So it can be simple. You've just got to understand the principles and the strategies behind it. And that's what a lot of people don't necessarily have access to, and also can't afford. It's expensive to see a psychologist proactively if it's not covered by Medicare, or you can only do a few sessions. So it is something that there just isn't universal access to, like there is fitness information or other nutritional information, other areas around our sort of holistic way of functioning.
Okay, well, Dr. Ruth, if you were to give us one thing that we could do today to be kind to ourselves, okay? Because I think it's a pretty normal thing for our minds to wander. I mean, I love the mindfulness techniques and the grounding techniques. I mean, you know that just before we came on, I was outside having earth time, which I do routinely. And I felt terrible before I went outside, and I went completely under, and I was asleep on the grass for about 20 minutes and woke up feeling wonderful and refreshed and ready to tackle the rest of the day. What would you say? What's one really practical thing that we could all do today, not as an elite athlete, just as a normal human being who has anxiety, who has the normal stresses of every life? What could we put in our toolkit, get us on our way? And by the way, Ruth, I think we should have more than one conversation. I think that we should have regular conversations, because I think this could be amazing, everyone to listen to. Whether people are having trouble at work, or they need to sort of realign themselves with how they perform at work or in their personal lives. But what's one thing that we could take away today and that we could start doing?
Well, I'll give you one thing for your mind and one thing for your body, because when we talked at the beginning, we talked about anxiety being an automatized stress response, so our flight or fight. So nothing will beat doing some slow, deep abdominal breathing. Now, different people have different strategies for that. There's a lot of tracks available on the internet, but a couple of minutes of slow, deep abdominal breathing where you're taking really slow, deep breaths for just a couple of minutes, and your mind is only focused on the breathing, is a really powerful way to counteract that anxious response. So you prompt a relaxation response by slowing your heart rate down, you'll release muscle tension, and then because you're only thinking about the breathing, it stops the cycle of worry going through your mind, and you'll have some clarity to then just focus on what you need to do next for the day. So I'd recommend everyone become friends with a really good deep breathing exercise, because it helps you in the moment with anxiety, but it also helps you control it over time. And then
I've always taken the breath in for 4 and then out for 6, slowly for 6. Is that something that or have I just made that up?
No,
Or
there's some good, that is definitely one technique you can use, and there's a variety of techniques. So it really depends. I use a specific one for sport, but outside of sport, it really depends on what works for you, as long as you achieve the key goal, which is you reducing your heart rate, you're releasing the muscle tension, and so the breathing's got to be slow enough for that. On my tracks, I have a count in for 3, and then a hold, and then a release, but it will give you the same impact as the one that you said, as long as it's slow enough. There's a lot of tracks on the internet that are easy to listen to, and it will train your mind into that. And then the other area around your thoughts. Thought control is hard, so I won't give a quick fix to that. But start working on your self-awareness and being non-judgmental. So all you're doing is paying attention to what you're thinking, and you're using those thoughts as information. You know, knowledge is power is the quote, but it's true. If you know you're doubting your ability, well, you can do something to turn that around. If you know that you're worrying about something, well, you know, you can do a strategy like you've said, schedule a little bit of time to worry about it, to work it through, but then contain it and make sure you refocus back on other things. So probably from a thought management perspective is start to increase your self-awareness about what are the specific patterns of thinking that are your own mind traps, because we all have different ones, and try and treat it as information that you can use, rather than like thinking that it's an inherent weakness that we're thinking about it, or becoming frustrated that process is going on. Use it as information, and then it will tell you what you need to do to create some change.
Fantastic. So when we increase our self-awareness, would journaling be a good way to start doing that? Just to be writing down in bullet point, even, you know, some self-awareness, you know, things that we understand about ourselves.
Yes, you know, journaling's really good. People who don't like journaling, it might be just noting 2 or 3 points. You can do it on your phone. You can write it down if you're a writer. Talk it through with someone if you don't like writing things down. So it's all about trying to find different ways that suit you and can individualize you. But self-awareness really is the most underrated and most important skill of them all, because the more self-aware you are, the more likely you are to be able to manage your psychological state really early. So it's a lot easier. And we have a lot less consequences rather than let it escalate. And the other thing is, the higher self-awareness you are, you'll pick the right strategies. That means it's more likely to work under pressure.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ruth. Well, I've loved chatting with you today, and I think we should have a few more chats, because I think that we could all benefit from discussing these sorts of tactics, if you like, tools that we can have at the ready for whatever comes our way. So thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to chatting to you again soon.
Thanks, Jane. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Ruth. Bye.
Bye.
We have loved this conversation and sharing this love letter with you, and we would like to invite you to send us your love letters. Visit the link in the show notes to send us your letters and to join our email list. See you next week.
Trust her words and let her wisdom show. Don't let your dreams fade away like a maybe. Life keeps rolling on, and then